And we have Tucker Carlson coming back on stage.
He's been pretty tough, but you know what? I said, somebody was asking me, is this fair? And I said, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
All of us want to know where these candidates
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for
This is the way
doing
it should be for all candidates. Here we go.
Good looking crowd you got here.
The most handsome people in Des Moines. Thank you for doing this.
No, it's a pleasure to be here.
And congratulations on your run. So as you think about running for president, I'm sure you think about the last election and what happened. Historic numbers for the current president, 81 million votes, 15 million more than Barack Obama, twice the population of New York City more than Barack Obama. What do you think of that?
In terms of Biden?
Yeah, 81 million votes. They are saying that Joe Biden got 81 million votes. And my question is, do you accept that? And second, how do you think he did that?
I mean, all I care about is changing that. Like, we can't afford a President Kamala Harris. I will say that over and over.
Amen.
And we have to do everything we can to make sure that that happens.
But as a mechanical question, it's not a trick question, it's just like the mechanics of it, something you're thinking about since you're running. I don't think anyone would say Joe Biden was a great candidate.
No.
Didn't campaign.
He didn't campaign at all.
He was not a figure who commanded respect among Democrats. They made fun of him. I'm not attacking the guy, but it's true.
Right.
Nobody in Washington said, I want my kid to grow up to be Joe Biden. And yet, at the end, he's got 81 million votes. 15 million more than Barack Obama, who, whatever you think of him, was a very talented politician, and I think smart. So, like, how did he do that? And what can we learn from that?
Well, what you can learn from it is what we did in South Carolina. I said in South Carolina, if you've got to show picture ID to buy Sudafed, if you've got to show picture ID to get on a plane, you should have to show picture ID to protect the integrity of the election process.
So,
you know, and we have to make sure election integrity is something we don't ever stop. You have to continue over and over. We've had some states who've done some great things and they've put voter ID in place, and that's been great. We still have some other states who haven't done anything, and we need to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to. I mean, we saw during COVID, a lot of people, a lot of secretaries of state changed rules without getting state legislative support. We saw a lot of that happening. We saw a lot of mail-out balloting. We've got to make sure we continue to fight to make sure we have integrity in the election process. Because I saw at the United Nations, when you have your people lose faith in an election system, that's the first crack of a country falling apart. We have to keep fighting for this. We have to make sure we get it done.
yes. So when I asked about this 81 million votes, you immediately said things I think I agree with about election integrity. Yeah. So are you suggesting that last election, it sounds like you're saying you don't think it was on the level.
Are you talking about the presidential?
That's correct, the presidential.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we all know that there were irregularities in there and that there were some issues that happened. We know that there was mail-out balloting that shouldn't have happened. Do I think that changed the results of the election? No. I mean, I think President Biden ended up winning the election. But I think at the end of the day, it showed we've got a lot of work to do in terms of election integrity.
So you mentioned mail-in ballots. Would you restrict that if you're president?
Yeah, I don't believe in mail-out ballots. I mean, if you do absentee ballots, in South Carolina, what we did is we did voter ID, we did absentee ballots, but you had to verify they were who they were. You matched up signatures. We counted them as they came in, so there should be no reason you're getting results 2 weeks out. That should never happen. And you have to make sure that and you have to keep cleaning your rolls so that dead people don't vote. I mean, that's a huge thing that we've got to do. And so I think we should always keep pushing for that.
So electronic voting machines, I think, are the majority of voting in America takes place on electronic voting machines. And I know that there are municipalities that haven't received access to the software that runs those machines. Why would that be, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I'd be happy if everybody just did paper ballots and then we were done.
Yeah. Do you think that that's, I think most people would agree with that. Do you think that that's something that governors should push for?
I mean, I think that you need to show the people of your state that they can trust the system. I always put a lot of weight in that in South Carolina. I wanted to make sure that every South Carolinian knew that we had fair elections, that we had verified elections, and that we were making sure that there were no dead people voting and no people duplicate voting. And I think every governor should make sure that that doesn't happen in their states. And I think that you also go a step further. Congress should also have oversight of election integrity to make sure if we have to change things. A lot happened during COVID. Learn those lessons and say, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? I think we've got some opportunities there.
It doesn't seem to be happening, though.
No, it doesn't. But what has Congress done for you lately?
Fair. Well, last question on this. I'm just interested, since you've been traveling, obviously you're running, all around the country, is this question, the question whether the elections are fair, whether your vote is counted, is this top of mind for Republican voters in your experience?
I think Republican voters want to have faith in their system. And I think there's still a lot of questions out there. I think they're still concerned that those things that happened during that election don't happen again. And that's why I think governors need to step up and make sure that they're doing the things. And some governors have done a great job. You have the best governor in the country, by the way. Kim Reynolds knocks it out of the park all the time. But I do think this is a responsibility that we should have. It's a democracy. And in a democracy, you want to make sure everybody has their vote. But more than that, the people need to trust the government that is doing those elections. And so we have to go and make sure that they have faith in that.
One of the things that we've learned, thank you for saying that, one of the things that we've learned in the almost 3 years since the last election is that various government agencies, intel agencies, law enforcement, FBI, CIA, NSA, were involved in shaping public opinion about the last election. They interfered with our election. And that suggests to a lot of people that maybe those agencies have too much unchecked power. You've worked in government. What do you think?
Well, yes, that's true. You know, when I was governor, I went and replaced the heads of every agency. It's the first thing I did when I came to office. It's the first thing a president should do, is you control what you can control, and you start with your agency. So I replaced the heads of every agency. I made sure they were people, some didn't vote for me, but they were people who knew that sector. So if it was veterans, it was someone who knew the challenges of veterans. If it was tourism, it was someone who knew heads and beds, people on golf courses. They knew what they needed to do, and I did that across the board. But the second thing I did is I put people in every agency. I sent in teams into every agency to clean it up, pull down regulations, down old issues, get rid of problem children. So in some cases, we had to tweak agencies. In other cases, we had to gut agencies. If you look at the American people don't trust our intelligence agencies. They don't trust our Department of Justice. So you can't just replace the person at the top. You've got to go through and really look at gutting those agencies and getting out a lot of that senior management and things that happen.
I think it's a really good point.
More than that, you have to understand that every action you take matters. So I'll give you an example. When I was at the United Nations, my very first week, someone got on the phone with the press and told them what I was going to do. None of it was what I was going to do. And so I called my staff and I said, who is this? And get rid of them. You're not going to believe who it was. John Kerry's sister. John Kerry's sister worked at the U.S. mission at the United Nations. And I said, get rid of her. And they said, you can't. She's here for 6 more months. And I said, you take her key pass, you take her computer, and we will pay her to sit at home, but she is not to walk back into this building.
Wow. Well, then
you have to be willing to really do the things to shake it up. The next thing that we have to do is, I know presidents typically meet with their governors once a year. I will meet with my governors once every quarter with the sole goal of get the power that's at the federal government, push it down to the states. That's how you empower people, is pushing it down. And you push it down. That can be education, that can be healthcare, that can be benefits. When I was governor in South Carolina, we had thousands of people on welfare. I went, and instead of them sitting on the couch, I went to our businesses and I said, look, if you will take this person and train them, I will pay this X number of weeks, and then you decide if you want to hire them. We moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. I went into our prison systems, and I wanted to know how they got in, what we did to them when they were there, and what we did when they came out. We went in, we put in computer classes. We taught them financial planning. We gave them faith-based classes if they wanted them. But we put equipment behind the fence, and we trained them. Now in South Carolina, when somebody leaves the fence, they've got a job to go to the next day. We have the lowest recidivism rate in the country.
What? I'm wondering, I wasn't going to bring this up, and this is not something that you did, but I just was noticing it, that homelessness in South Carolina has risen dramatically recently, as it has in a lot of places around the country. it's a sign of obvious failure. If your citizens are living on the street and dying of drug ODs and no one notices, then it's not working. Why do you think that's happening, and what can government do about it?
Well, first, that's your Bidenomics for you. I mean, let's make sure that people cannot afford things. And I'll tell you the one thing that's more shameful than anything as a military spouse, 33,000 of our heroes are homeless today. That's shameful. We should never treat our veterans that way. But you look at homelessness otherwise, and America has refused to deal with the cancer that is mental health. 1 in 4 people have a mental health issue. But if treated, they can live a perfectly normal life. The problem is, and you look at our veterans, 1 in 3 suffer from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. But right now, if you look at it, if somebody knows they have an issue, which a lot of our teenagers do and young adults do, they can't find a therapist because we don't have enough. There aren't enough treatment centers. If someone with a mental health issue doesn't get help, they get into an addiction. There aren't enough addiction centers. And oh, by the way, if you happen to be one of those blessed ones that gets it, insurance doesn't cover it. We have got to do this. We're losing Americans every day just because of that. And the homelessness is a lot of that. I saw that, you'll see in South Carolina, they'll take people that have mental health issues and they'll put them in jail for 48 hours, or they'll send them to the hospital for 48 hours. That's not doing anything to treat these people and the challenges that they have.
Well, so what would you do if you don't send them to a therapist?
Well, we have to get mental health treatment. We should have telehealth all over the country, one for our veterans, but for people who need real-time help, they should be able to get a doctor on their computer or phone at any given time.
But there's never been a higher percentage of Americans on prescribed psychiatric drugs, benzodiazepines and amphetamines. It's the highest it's ever been, and SSRIs. And the suicide rate keeps going up. Mm-hmm. So is there a point at which we say this isn't working, this treatment that we're offering?
Well, now you're talking about something totally different. I mean,
but that is the treatment for most people.
We have a broken healthcare system, and we have to make sure that we completely tear it up, from the insurance companies to the hospitals to the doctors to the PBMs to the pharmaceutical companies, because right now, doctors love to just prescribe. They love to give drugs. They love to do whatever. But doctors are never judged on the outcomes. Doctors need to, rather than us looking at how many appointments they have, how many prescriptions they write, what about if we talked about the outcomes? What did you do for that patient? Did that patient get better? That's the method that we should start looking at for healthcare. And then people need to have options. My mom, I take care of my parents. They're 87 and 89. My mom was in the hospital. She had no say in what that hospital bill was. They brought her Tylenol she didn't want, and they said, well, you're going to pay for it anyway. You might as well take it. You have an insurance company and a hospital negotiating that, and she is nowhere in that conversation. So we will make it all transparent, make those insurance companies have to show us what they're doing, make those hospitals show us what they're doing, make these doctors have to say what they're doing and the outcomes, and let's make sure pharmaceutical companies suddenly have to show us what they do. When we do that, if we just dealt with the insurance companies, we'd cut healthcare in half. So we have to do those things. Yeah, I think doctors now easily prescribe because it's the easy way out. But if we held them accountable on outcomes and started actually showing that and putting that online, wouldn't that make a difference? I think it would.
Amen. You mentioned John Kerry's sister, and it reminds me one of the trends in government is emergencies are identified that we're told are so threatening to this country that people can't be consulted on the policies we use to address them, whether it's COVID and climate, huge. And so the debate over whether climate's changing is measurable. The debate over why it's changing is much more subjective. Do you think climate change is driven by human activity?
I think climate change is real, but I think the conversation has been taken so out of whack that if you look at what Biden's done with all of these subsidies. When I was at the United Nations, there was the Paris Climate Agreement. And it sounds good, like, oh, everybody needs to go take care of the environment. But what I saw is they were holding countries to different standards. So Obama put this massive amount of regulations and all these abuses on our businesses and companies because he was trying to show that he was, that we really cared about the environment, when America's actually extremely good when it comes to the environment. We all want clean air, we all want clean water, and we work on it every day. If you really want to deal with the environment, if you really want, then do what I saw. Go talk to China and India. Those are the biggest polluters, and no one is making them do anything about it. And not only that, while we had all the regulations on the U.S., China's was they would deal with it in 10 years. I can promise you 10 years never comes for China. That's the problem. That's why we got out of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Right, and you dealt with this question all the time at the UN, the question of how does the world respond to climate change. But there are really two questions. One is the climate changing? And I guess we can measure its temperature around the globe over a period of years. But the deeper question is why? We had glaciers 10,000 years ago. The climate has always changed dramatically since the formation of the Earth. So do you think humans are causing this change? And do you think that we can stop or slow it down? Like, is there actual evidence?
I mean, honestly, I don't know how much is being changed or not, as much as I know that putting electric vehicles on the road is not the answer to what you're doing. I saw, as governor of South Carolina, we had companies come, and on their own, they would spend money to try and be more green. They wanted to be total good stewards on their own. Whatever they did, we didn't have to mandate that. We didn't have to require that. And I don't know how much of a difference that would have made at what they did anyway. I mean, I think right now the biggest issue I have is that you've got America right now going hat in hand to Saudi Arabia and getting dirty oil from Iran and Venezuela. We should be energy independent no matter what. I don't care what anybody says about the environment. This is a national security threat of not having energy independence. So people can say whatever they want to say about why the environment is the way it is. What I'm going to say is my job as president is to make sure that America is safe. And if America is safe, one of those factors is being energy independent. I saw at the United Nations, there were two things our enemies never wanted us to have. They never wanted us to be energy independent, and they never wanted us to have a strong military. We have to always have both of those things.
Well, speaking of energy in the military, who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
I mean, I don't know.
I'm not claiming you did it.
No.
I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Do you know who did it?
Seems pretty obvious. It was backed by the Biden administration, I would say. I mean, I think all the evidence suggests that, but I wasn't there. But I mean, that seems like a huge step. This is the largest industrial sabotage in history, sent more carbon in the atmosphere than any act ever. And like, there's weirdly no curiosity about who did it. And I think that's strange. Why do you think
there's a lot of things that are strange with the Biden administration. This is
Fair.
the first one.
I guess what I'm really saying is if you were running against the Biden administration, to do something like that and shaft our closest allies in the world, which would be Western Europe, and deprive them of the energy they need to run their manufacturing sector and destroy their economy, which it is in the process of doing, like, that's a major sin to have done something like that. You just betrayed our allies, and no one on the right is accusing the Bidens of what they clearly did. So I don't know why.
Well, no one is accusing the Bidens aren't being accountable on anything. I mean, you look at the cocaine that was just found in there. I mean, that's a whole nother issue.
Whose was that?
So let me tell you this. No.
Oh, go ahead. No one's watching. Just what do you think?
No, this is really important because I have been into that area of the White House. This is not,
it's party time.
As much as they want to say, and don't forget the pot that they just said was found there last year, right? So everything that they're saying is that hundreds of people went through this area. No, I've been to that area. It is the most secure area anywhere because this is where I, on the National Security Council, with other members of national security, met with the president. You discussed the most secure things. I know the area where the locker is. People don't just go in and out of there. It is either the president, the vice president, cabinet, cabinet members, or deputy directors. Nobody else is going in there. There is some staff, but it's immediate to, I couldn't take any staff but my deputy. The president would take his chief of staff, very limited. So for them to say they don't know who this was, don't tell me there's no cameras in there. There are absolutely cameras in there. So I will tell you, I strongly believe this is a cover-up for either Hunter or someone very close to the president, and they don't want to say who it is. But the problem I have is now your answer is, oh, this isn't a big deal because, by the way, there was marijuana twice last year. Why didn't you do anything about that? Like, who has time to go into the national security skiff, open the locker, and put drugs inside? Like, that's a bigger problem, because if you've got somebody doing cocaine deciding on national security, that's what I'm worried about.
Well, and it shows, I would say.
I totally agree.
So that, we seem to be closer to nuclear war than any time in my life.
Add some coke to it.
So,
you
like,
don't know what's gonna happen.
I guess I'm a little bit confused as to how, in the face of that, this sort of unending litany of failures from the party in charge, there could be like any contest this year at all, no matter who the nominee is. And yet, Democrats seem durably popular. I mean, you think they just generically to be at about 10. Because, like, what have they done for you? Nothing. You know, they scream at you all the time, call you names, and make you poorer. So, like, what is that? I mean, does the Republican Party, it does seem like it should be doing better than it is, without blaming anyone in specifically.
No, but look, I've always spoken hard truths, and I think it's really important. We are $32 trillion in debt. We are having to borrow money just to make our interest payments. China owns some of that debt. It would be easy for me to tell you, oh, Biden and the Democrats did that. Our Republicans did that to us too. You go back and you look at that $4 trillion stimulus bill that was passed with no accountability whatsoever, expanded welfare that has now left us with 90 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. And did Republicans try and make that right? Nope. They doubled down and opened up earmarks for the first time in 10 years, pushing through 7,000 of them in December. Want to know how they spent your money? $30 million on an honors college in Vermont. $10 million to tear down a hotel in Alaska, $7.5 million on a courthouse in Colorado. And the list goes on, all while 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bill. 60% of Americans are in credit card debt. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. So we've got a spending problem in Congress. There are no saints in Congress right now. They love to spend our money, and it is high time we deal with that. And the way we deal with that when it comes to the economy is we should claw back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that's still out there.
Is there,
instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud that exist. If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing, cut up the credit cards. You have to balance a budget every day. I had to balance a budget as governor. The accountant in me says, stop the spending, stop the earmarks, stop the borrowing, and I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels.
So, thank you for that. So, finally, just as kind of a window into what you like and what you don't like, you've attacked the Congress. I don't think there's anyone would disagree with what you said. But are there individual members in the House or Senate, you must know most of them, who you admire and you think are doing a good job?
No, of course. I mean, I think Iowa, you've got a fantastic delegation. I mean, you look at, what Joni Ernst does, or Grassley does, or Ashley Henson, or Marionette Miller-Meeks. By the way, Brenna Bird is fantastic. But there are lots of...
So Iowa leads the way, really.
No. It's not that. We have certain people. This is not about having good people. This is about having a good conservative agenda so that all of a sudden government understands the value of a dollar. They've lost the value of a dollar. We've seen that. And so yes, you can have good people, but if the good people aren't stopping the spending, then we've got to make sure from the top we say, we're done, no more. You're not going to do this anymore.
So last question, which I can't resist. If they're still classifying the JFK assassination docs 60 years later, they're just mocking us, aren't they?
It's the same thing with the UFOs. They're totally making everybody want to know what happened. You just need to release all of that. Release it all. Let us see it. There's no reason to hold on to that now. Release it now.
Well, good for you. Well, thank you. You won me on that one. Nikki Haley.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
You know, I want to leave you with this. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate that, but I want to leave you with this. Someone asked me why I was running. And I said, you know, my parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that country again. My husband is deployed. I want him and his military brothers and sisters to know their sacrifice matters, that we do love our country. My daughter, I'm doing this for her because she and her husband just got married and I saw how hard it was for them to buy a home. And my son is a senior in college. And I've watched him write papers of things he doesn't believe in just to get an A. That's not us. That's not America. We deserve better. 78% of Americans right now don't think their kids are going to live as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. I'm not okay with that. We've got a country to save. Go to NikkiHaley.com if you want to join me, and I promise you our best days are to come. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that.
Appreciate
That was great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to just get a quick